The Word of God is serious. Can you say amen? You don't play with it. You don't mock it. You don't reject it. You don't manipulate it. You obey it.
Welcome to the program Warning. Today is the second day where I'm interviewing Walid Shoebat. He's an ex-Muslim terrorist. He wrote the book God's War on Terror. I believe we're living in very, very dangerous times, and I believe they're only going to get worse before Jesus returns. I believe the book of Revelation is literally about ready to be opened up, and we're going to be walking through these times. We're going to be walking in the times when the Antichrist comes to power. And I think, for the most part, most people will not recognize him. He'll come in during a time of crisis, and he will come into power when people look to him as a savior, as a man of peace. But then, all of a sudden, his true identity will be, I believe, revealed to the ones that are looking for the true Messiah, Jesus Christ. Again, we're entering into very troubling times. As we speak right now, the economy is crashing. I believe we're going to see different types of attack, chemical, biological, nuclear terrorism and or attack. But yet, I do believe this is going to be a time when the church, through this trouble, will finally put on the armor of God and be what the church is supposed to be. But right now, again, that has not happened. The church is asleep. The church has failed. And that, for a great part, is why we're in so much trouble in the United States today, where we seem to be in bed with our enemies. Saudi Arabia, a huge sponsor of terrorism, promotes wannabeism, the most radical form of teaching on Islam. Yet they back it, they support it, they pour billions of US dollars into it, yet they're our ally. Something doesn't add up. What is going on? The President of the United States says it's a peaceful religion, Islam. Yet, all through history, it's a very violent religion, and every president has said it. In fact, President Thomas Jefferson declared war on Islam. So what is going on today? Once again, I have in the studio ex-Muslim terrorist Walid Shoebat. Walid, welcome back to the program Warning.
Thank you for having me again.
Yesterday we left off saying that it seems like many nations, the United Nations, the President of the United States, both the previous President, President George Bush, and now President Barack Hussein Obama, they seem to be defending Islam. They seem to be trying to promote that it's a peaceful religion, when throughout history everybody knows it's the most violent, dangerous religion, and I personally believe it's the most dangerous religion, and I should maybe correct myself, the most dangerous constitution, like we established yesterday on the program. In fact, you said it very clearly why it's a constitution, and even they call it a constitution, the Muslims. Yet if this religion, this constitution, this ideology, trying to purport itself as a religion, if it's peaceful, why, since their inception, have they been nothing but terrorizing nations, conquering nations, subjecting nations, forcing them to pay their taxes or killing them? Again, the Crusade Wars started when 2/3 of Christian lands were run over by Muslim aggression, and finally the first Crusade Wars started. So Walid, why is everybody seemingly defending Islam today?
Well, if you look at the West and the mentality of the West, they always try to find something good in everything. So they say, if you don't want to defeat them in an unnecessary war, let us join them somehow. Maybe we can find some moderate elements, and maybe we can evolve Islam into joining the 20th century. This has been the myth in the West, that we need to establish Islamic democracy. The question of Islamic democracy, and I've heard...
Well, let me just say something. Are you trying to tell me that in reality the West, including the president, realize how dangerous it is, but he's just ignoring that, trying to instead literally bribe them into submission?
Well, they thought that we can find some friends from the Islamic elements, leadership, secular leaders who are not part of the Islamist movement. You have Hosni Mubarak, who's not part of the Muslim Brotherhood, who quarrels with the Brotherhood. You have King of Jordan, who quarrels himself with the Islamist, and they consider him as a secularist. So they would think that they could enforce a certain amount of logic into the Muslim community as a whole in order for them to come up with a new evolved Islam. This is why they call it Islamic democracy. Saying something like Islamic democracy is like saying, let us establish a capitalistic communism.
So you're saying that these if we want to be blunt, these hypocritical Muslim leaders, these secular leaders, they're trying to use them to try to live with Islam. And as our last program said, you said they're doing this because of the oil.
That's right.
So they're trying to basically use the relationships with these hypocritical Muslim leaders.
That is right.
To try to appease Islam.
That is correct. They have the money, they have the power, they can take out the fiery preachers of the Islamists, and they can put in moderate preachers who can preach secularism, harmony, love, and these kind of things. You know, as I said, it's an oxymoron to say that there is Islamic democracy. It's like saying capitalistic communism. There is no such thing. Islam is Islam from its inception. So this is the fallacy of the West. They will attend to support what they think is the lesser of the two evils. So in essence, they will support governments, dictators in those areas, which makes the Islamist even become more emboldened because they say, see how the West deals with us as a community. They rather put a dictator, knowing that these people are evil men, they're not really good for their people, you see. So they are winning the arguments of the masses. So the more that we are trying in the West to fight the Islamists, they're winning the grounds. The reason is because we have to support other evil men or the lesser of the two evils in order to defeat what we think is the fanatics.
That's why we basically initially supported Saddam Hussein.
That is correct. We supported Saddam Hussein because Iran was an Islamist that wants to have a world expansion. Saddam Hussein was simply a thug that is sitting on his seat. As long as he has his seat, as long as he has his power, he can remove the Islamists for us. And he can moderate Islam. So this is the fallacy of this whole thing. Islam cannot be moderated, cannot be changed. Something that existed for 1,000 and so years ago in its own form, the same as Christianity. Can we change Christianity and make it secularism? It can't. It's a faith. It's a biblical faith system. You can't change. That faith of Christianity is the same faith from its inception.
So what you're saying is basically the United Nations, the President of the United States, these European nations, they understand in reality what Islam really is as far as the most violent, dangerous, if we want to say religion, but yet what they're trying to do is work through different secular Muslim leaders, so to speak, hypocrites, if we want to say that word,
yes,
to try to dumb down or make Islam more palatable and less violent, and make, basically, I think, doing that, it's also the same thing they're going to eventually do to fundamental Christians that are very zealous about Jesus Christ. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is one part of the answer to your question. The other part of the answer to your question is that we are the ones that in reality, by doing so, creating the confidence level for the Islamists to win their cause in their countries. What am I saying here? Islam is like the stock market. The stock market goes up when the confidence in the economy goes up. It's a form of perception. We in the West wanted to destroy communism. How did we do it? We collaborated with the Mujahideen of Afghanistan, Islamists.
You bet.
And we gave them Stinger missiles and we gave them weapons. They defeated communism. And we declared victory by using these Islamists. That victory with communist Russia generated such a confidence buildup in the Muslim world that now that we defeated Russia, a second superpower, we can now defeat the United States of America, the #1 superpower. In other words, you defeated a minor Satan to create a bigger Satan. And we have 57 Muslim countries. And Islamism is spreading like wildfire.
Can you change the religion called Islam?
Can you change Nazism? Because we are not talking about a religion. We are not talking about somebody going out and praying to his God on a personal level, secludes himself in a closet to ask God to help him. We are talking about a system. So from Islam, as a system of government, the only way to deal with it is as we dealt with Nazism. Why? Because Nazism and communism had two elements that are in common. Number one, they have no respect for borders. This is why if you go to my website, shoebat.com, shoebat.com, and you go to the bottom, you will see a clip in which you will see the Muslims singing, "We have came in unison and we have marched through your borders." They have infiltrated your borders. And the second thing is that the end justifies the means. In other words, you can use any means in order to gain victory for the cause of Allah. Any means mean what? Any means. Violence, bribery, lies,
Torture.
coercion, yes, coercion, especially coercion. This is why everybody's afraid of Islam, and the answer is coercion. The moment you speak against Islam, coercion. You get lawsuits, you get death threats. People don't want to deal with that. In other words, who was the one that said, appeasement is the process of feeding the alligator, hoping that he eats you last?
Exactly. Now, what the West is trying to do, basically, then, is work to try to nullify the reality of what Islam really teaches, the Quran, Muhammad.
That is
and so
correct.
they're doing it through these secular Muslim leaders.
That's right. And they are becoming the propagandists for the very machine that they are fighting.
Now, Osama bin Laden, who is a serious Muslim, he can't be bought off, if we want to say that. He can't be bribed. He can't be threatened. He understands exactly what the West is doing and calling on all Muslims to seriously obey the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad through the hadiths.
Yeah, that's correct.
Isn't that what he's doing?
That is exactly what he's doing. He wants to take over. His gripe was with Saudi Arabia. He wants to be the ruler of Saudi Arabia. He wanted to remove all the kings of Saudi Arabia and establish an Islamic caliphate centered in Saudi Arabia. He failed. So now he goes to the rest of the globe, the Islamic world, and he wants to invoke Sharia law everywhere he went. However, the Western problem is that when they think of Islamic terrorism, the first thing that will come to their mind, they will think of Al-Qaeda, which is a terror organization. What they are not thinking about is not just a terror organization. What they need to think about is the terror state. And this is why I always ask questioners, if you think that this problem is a problem of a terror organization, question number one, is Iran a terror state or a terror organization? No one can deny Iran is a terror state. Somalia is a terror state. Sudan is a terror state. Lebanon has become a terror state. Hamasistan has become a terror state. We're dealing with separate states, different states. Pakistan, that has nuclear weapon, is also a terror state within a state. The moment that Pakistan loses its government, Al-Qaeda and Islamists will have nuclear. We are worried about the buildup of nuclear weapons in Iraq. Yet we are not worried that Pakistan already has nuclear weapons.
And they are Muslim.
And they are Muslim fundamentalist. 65% of Pakistan supports Al-Qaeda. So if you have elections, you will have an Islamist get into government. You had the ousting of Pervez Musharraf. You know, for years I have been saying Pervez Musharraf will be thrown out of government. I was right. He was thrown out of government. And what will happen afterwards is a formation of a government that will support the Islamist movement.
My. So what the West and the United Nations, the European Union are all trying to do eventually will be for naught.
Absolutely. Unless they accept the status quo, the reality, there is only two choices in anything. The choice is to accept that Islam is Nazism. That is the only choice we have. Until then, appeasing it is what Chamberlain did. I came back from Hitler. I have it. I have the paper. I have the promise and the signature of Hitler. Everybody believed it, yet Churchill warned. Churchill was a Nazi phobe. In other words, be proud Islamophobes, and let's move on and fight against that war.
So Islam, in and by itself, is a very dangerous and the most violent religion on the face of the earth today.
It is the most violent system as well, not just a religion, as a form of a system, because it's Sharia law, the inception of the Sharia law, and what you find in the Islamic Sharia law. If you go to Pakistan, they have what is called the law of insulting the Prophet. If you insult the Prophet of Islam or you critique Islam, it's called the blasphemy law. If you critique Islam, you have blasphemed Allah and Muhammad automatically. You could receive a death punishment or imprisonment. Or they can give you to the masses in the streets and they will kill you anyway in the street. So this is the part of the Islamic law. There is amputations. In fact, when it comes to the apologist of Islam, you say, why is Islam a peaceful religion? They will give you certain quotes from the Quran, like the Quran says, whoever kills a life kills the entire earth. Whoever saves a life saves the entire earth. Sounds beautiful, borrowed from the Talmud. Now, most Westerners, I could say 99.9%, who know that verse and use it as a form of showing the peacefulness of Islam, do not continue to read the rest of the verses. I wish they could show it on your screen. But for so whoever does mischief in the land, then cut their hands and feet from opposite sides and crucify them. Hamas issued an edict recently to crucify enemies. Those crucifixions and amputations is part and parcel of the Quran itself.
So what's happening all over the world as far as this inhuman treatment of people, that is just an innate part of Islam.
It is Islam, and there is no other answer. Islam is a bipolar disorder kind of a religion in which you will find verses of peace and you will find totally the opposite verses. What the West doesn't understand is that the peaceful verses in the Quran has been abrogated. In other words, they do not understand the law of abrogation in Islam. All Muslim scholars agree unanimously that the verse of the sword, the violent part of Islam, have superseded all the peaceful verses, and all the peaceful verses were made null and void. Muslim apologists deny the law of abrogation. If the law of abrogation is not true, there is a verse in the Quran that says, O ye believers, do not pray while you are drunk. In other words, drinking was not forbidden in Islam. Now drinking is totally forbidden in Islam. So what happened to the verse that said it's okay to drink, but just don't pray when you're drunk? If you ever get drunk, don't pray. Allah didn't like you to pray. So what happened to that verse? All Muslims, there is no Muslim on earth that does not agree that this verse been abrogated, that the law of abrogation is part and parcel of Islam.
So all Muslims, whether they want to recognize it or not, actually fall under the doctrines, the commandments of Muhammad and what's taught in the Quran.
All Americans fall under the Constitution of the United States of America. All Muslims fall under the Constitution of the Islamic religion and what is called Sharia law. No scholar in the world, none whatsoever, that would tell you that Sharia is not a set of laws. No scholar in the world that would deny that Islam is a constitution and a set of laws. What are these laws are very important. It's very important for us as Westerners to understand what's in those sets of laws. Once we understand what's in the laws of Islam and we view all the things in the laws of Islam, Westerners begin to realize that this is a very Nazistic system, very similar to Nazism. In fact, if you compare the treatment of minorities in Islam, you will find it almost exact parallel of the treatment of Jews in Nazism. In Islam, a Jew must wear a yellow patch on his right shoulder. In Nazism, a Jew must wear a yellow patch on his right shoulder. In Islam, a Jew and a Christian cannot enter into a Muslim bathhouse. You know, you had bathhouses in those days. In Nazism, a Jew must never enter into a German restaurant. In Islam, a Jew must never be a judge in a Muslim court. In Nazism, a Jew must never be a judge in a German court. In Islam, no one can adopt a Muslim baby unless he is Muslim. Adoption of Muslim children by Jews is forbidden. The same thing in Nazism. I am sure you can tell that story better than I. You've experienced it yourself.
Yes.
So I can go on and on and on. In Islam, the final solution to the Jewish people is eschatological in accordance to the Prophet of Islam, who stated, "The day of judgment shall not come to pass until the tribes of Islam defeat the tribes of Israel." In Nazism, it has the final solution to the Jewish problem by eradicating world Jewry, by combining its efforts with Islam, as in Europe they began to execute all Jews in the ovens of Treblinka and Auschwitz. The Muslim world was supposed to do its parts to destroy the Jews. In fact, most Westerners do not even know that two divisions of the Nazi war machine were Muslim fundamentalists.
And also, history has it documented where Adolf Hitler himself made statements about the religion of Islam, and he'd rather Islam had been the religion of Germany rather than what he called a flabby Christianity.
That is correct. He called it a flabby religion, that Islam will be better for the fatherland, that men will die for the cause of the fatherland. And since the Arabs could not live, and the Arabs themselves could not live in Germany, finally the Aryan people would all become Muslim and Europe will be Islamic. And he did not mind collaborating with Muslims. In fact, Hajj Amin al-Husseini was nicknamed by Adolf Hitler as the Führer of the Arab world.
Yes, and Hitler had an imam that was giving him counsel, including him giving advice on how to kill the Jews. Is that correct?
I should know that imam. He was a guest at our own home. He was a guest at my grandfather's house, where I used to live.
Wow.
And he wanted nothing but the destruction of the Jews. My grandfather was almost executed as a result of this man later on, his own friend, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. 17 chieftains were executed. My grandfather escaped death because he was a dignitary and he fed Hajj Amin al-Husseini with his cohorts and his relatives. So he had a very good connection with him, my grandfather. Now, from my American side, my great-grandfather was an excellent friend with Winston Churchill, who wanted nothing but the destruction of Nazism. So I should know both sides of this angle. I lived right in the middle.
So Hitler was getting counsel from this Muslim leader on how to eradicate, commit genocide against the Jews.
In fact, if anybody doesn't want to believe this statement he just mentioned, they need to look at the eve of the final solution, when Hitler decided to liquidate all the Jews in Europe. Who was with him? You can see him sitting with Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, my grandfather's friend. In fact, he was the cause of the death of 500,000 Jews. When the Hungarian Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs wanted to allow the Jews to go to Israel, Hajj Amin al-Husseini sent a letter urging the Hungarian Prime Minister not to allow them to go. They all died in the ovens. He was the Haman of the Muslim world. He was the Führer of the Arab world.
So in reality, Walid, there is no such thing as moderate Islam. A moderate Muslim is just not living out his faith taught by the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad, the Hadiths. Is that correct?
There is no moderate Nazism, but there are Nazis who find the folly of their ways and they become like Oskar Schindler and they help Jews. In other words, there are people who claim to be Muslims who are peaceful individuals, not because of Islam, but despite of Islam. And we see this, we've seen the same thing in the Nazis. We've seen Germans who were good citizens, who were righteous people, who did help the Jews to escape. So we need to define this system separate from individuals. And that's the problem. Whenever you begin to define the system, Islamic apologists will always say that you are saying that Muslims are violent and Muslims are bad people. They always refer it to the individual, and that's the problem, and that's how you get nicknamed as an Islamophobe.
So we've got to take it right back to the source and call it for what it is, the teachings out of the Quran, the teachings of the Hadiths, Muhammad. These are violent teachings, and it's really a constitution.
It sends us back to the Middle Ages of the 600 AD. That was the lifestyle of the 600 AD, where amputations was rampant, stoning was rampant, jihad was rampant. Whenever we go to Islam, this is what happens. Islam wants to revive itself. Islam was wounded by the West. As you said, Jefferson declared war on Islam long time ago. The Muslims know that the West defeated them. They want to revive their system. And this is why, if you look at a clip by Al-Muhajirun in England, in Great Britain, what was the clip saying? The leader of Al-Muhajirun was saying on TV, the West came to know that Islam is the truth, that the giant of Islam will rise again. What is this rise again? It was something that was wounded.
We're going to continue with this tomorrow.
Call and order Walid Shoebat's book, God's War on Terror, for a donation of $35 or more, plus shipping and handling. You can order this 6-DVD interview series with Walid Shoebat for a donation of $50 or more, plus shipping and handling. If you want both Walid's book and the 6-DVD interview series, send your donation of $85 or more, plus shipping and handling. Call and order Dr. Hansen's informative 6-DVD series, Jesus versus Muhammad, the Bible versus the Quran, for a donation of $50 or more, plus shipping and handling. For a donation of $135 or more, plus shipping and handling, you can receive all of these. Dr. Hansen's 6-DVD series, Jesus versus Muhammad, the Bible versus the Quran, plus the 6-DVD series, Ex-Muslim Terrorist Walid Shoebat, plus Walid Shoebat's book, God's War on Terror. It is your donations and support that keep us on this television station. Telephone 360-629-5248 today.